its pretensions to legitimacy. And out of context, admittedly, the numbers are kind of impressive. Architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth touts over 1,600 architects and engineers having signed on to ally themselves with that group.
However many experts your side boasts is an irrelevant red herring. An argument's merit rests on the verifiability of its claims, not on the prominence or number of authorities that back it. This goes for the official version of 9/11 as well as the unofficial version.
Of course, just as when creationists and climate change deniers brag about how many smart people agree with them, once you realize that the truthers only account for just a minuscule sliver of the total number of people in their respective fields, the numbers kind of lose their edge.
Upon wondering why so many professionals do not make contentions out of the official story, you first have to realize their concerns of risking their career by being associated with the media caricature of 9/11 truthers as unstable, tin-foil hat-wearing nutcases. Then you have to understand that there was already an investigation done by many experts who came to the apparent conclusion that there was no conspiracy to the events behind 9/11. From a neutral standpoint, it would appear to be a closed case, which is all the excuse they need not to get involved.
Calls for investigations that have already been conducted. Never mind, I guess, that 9/11 is already the most investigated event in the history of investigated events. Because who knows, maybe that next investigation will be the one that disproves all the other investigations.
Stephen, what is the probability of a steel-framed structure experiencing a total collapse from fires? The answer is 0. No skyscraper in history has ever experienced such a collapse. Even when you factor in the structural damage inflicted by the plane impacts, a damage level which was well within their ability to tolerate, there was no reason at all to expect that the Twin Towers would have collapsed, never mind in the symmetrical pattern, or at near free-fall speed, which is something that both of the 9/11 commissions you cite will admit to. Furthermore, that the investigation into the most bizarre collapse in recorded history was assigned to the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and not to much more prestigious bodies like MIT or Harvard, which are private and more independent organizations, is very suspicious. There's certainly no end of dissatisfaction towards the job they did, even from those not associated in the 9/11 Truth community. NIST thought the telltale signs of their incompetence could be buried in the absurd 10,000-page long report they slammed out, a report which was painstakingly combed over and picked apart by independent researchers. Have you tried going through any of that before you opened your big mouth? Stephen here most likely hasn't investigated the case made by 9/11 for either side, instead choosing to swallow the conclusions made by government agencies. This is something that all too many have been guilty of, and make no mistake, it is one of the many reasons why America is headed towards financial ruin.
Because who knows, maybe that next investigation will be the one that disproves all the other investigations. You know, the ones that determined that the attacks were the results of terrorists hijacking planes and crashing them into shit?
Wrong. As it pertains to the investigation into Tower 7, NIST's grounds for dismissing the controlled demolition theory were based solely on the noise that such explosions would have made.
And our analysis showed that even the smallest explosive charge that was capable of bringing down the critical column in the building, had it occurred, we would have seen sound levels of 120 to 130 decibels about a half a mile away. That would have been an incredibly loud sound, and that sound was not picked up by any of the videos or witnesses that we have talked.
They did not consider the possibility of the chemical agent thermite being involved, which is odd since thermite does not emit such noise levels.
The obsession with Building 7. What about Building 7? Why won't they investigate Building 7? What happened to Building 7? There were 3 skyscrapers that fell that day, not 2. Larry Silverstein. Pull it. What about the CIA office in Building 7? What are they trying to hide? What brought down Building 7? A plane never even hit Building 7.
Yes, you are absolutely right. There has been an overemphasis on Tower 7, if for no other reason that it wasn't hit by a plane. As was said earlier, the probability of a steel-framed skyscraper collapsing due to fire is 0. But there wasn't just a single collapse that day. There was 3 of them. And as the creator of James Bond so wisely noted, once is happenstance, twice is coincidence, 3 times is enemy action. This man was a World War II veteran who participated in multiple undercover operations. I suggest you take his advice to heart.
That controlled demolition bullshit. To me, this might be the most irritating 9/11 conspiracy theory, and they're all fucking irritating. Never mind how preposterous it is to see commercial airliners slam head-on into skyscrapers and then afterwards tell people with a straight face that it was probably a series of precisely placed thermite charges installed secretly that caused the buildings to collapse.
You fool! How ignorant and stupid can you possibly get? The Twin Towers were specifically built to withstand an impact event of this magnitude. That is common knowledge. Both the World Trade Center construction engineer, Frank DeMartini, and the head structural engineer, John Skilling, went on record to confirm that the towers would have been able to survive the impact of a Boeing 707 traveling at 600 miles per hour, which would have had as much kinetic energy as either of the 767-200s that did crash into them on September 11th. With that fact in mind, the damage done to the towers would have been insignificant. Only a fire could have brought down the towers to their knees, and the kind of fire required for that simply wasn't present. It would have had to consume the entire building, reach incredible temperatures, and literally burn for hours, you fucking moron.
No, that's not the most irritating part. The most irritating part is when people will show you video of the towers collapsing and they'll say, see, looks just like a controlled demolition, doesn't it?
Okay, I'm gonna try not to have a brain aneurysm. The reason why 9/11 truthers mention controlled demolition so prominently is because it perfectly dovetails with the conditions that were observed with the tower's collapse, namely the free fall acceleration. Don't you remember the report filed by David Chandler? If you had an understanding of physics equal to even a junior high student, you would realize that the very presence of free-fall acceleration means that the upper block could not be crushing or driving down the lower foundations. Thus, you cannot tap into that enormous gravitational energy to explain the collapse. It's off limits, and that leaves you SOL. There is only one possible culprit, and that is controlled demolition.
It doesn't tell us what really happened. So let's say the official story isn't true. Let's say that the 9/11 Commission report is part of just a big old government cover-up. What really happened that day, truthers?